The goal of Data Transformers podcast is to accelerate digital transformation by bridging the gap between business outcomes and rapidly advancing technologies. And we aim to bridge this gap by focusing on data. I am Peggy Tsai, top 50 women in tech influencer, co-author of the AI book, and data governance expert.
I'm Ramesh Danta, an entrepreneur, a tech blogger, and AI enthusiast.
Today, I'm really pleased to have Kevin Ladwig, a managing director of data governance consultant at Information Assets, join us today. Welcome, Kevin.
Oh, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Welcome.
So first, maybe I'll start off with asking you, Kevin, what do you do at Information Assets? And what is Information Assets, for those of you not familiar?
Yeah, Information Asset is a premier provider of data governance, data management solutions. A lot of our focus lately, or in the past, has been, standing up products like Calibra, Axon, Informatic, Elation, Manta, all that fun stuff, integrations and stuff like that. But what I really think, or really the audience might be interested in, I believe, is there's a change. The pendulum has switched. It used to be that, you and I and folks like us would say, well, let's go stand up data governance, let's stand up data management tools, the kind of what and the how, But the pendulum's changed. It isn't what and how anymore. It's turned to why. Just let that thing sink in for a second. What does that mean? It's changed to why. You ever been on a project? I know I stood up a couple customers, like one of the large learning science companies out of New York. And at the end of the year, they said, why are we doing governance, right? And it wasn't so much why, it's because, well, we know we want good data quality. That ain't what why means anymore. You guys with me so far?
Yep.
The why is, can you, Kevin, quantify the value of our program, or even more so, quantify the value of the data that's within our program? Or people start going, well, it isn't so much data anymore, it's the enterprise metadata, it's the relationships and characteristics of why they exist. For example, I may have, and I'm a data governance, I'm a CDO, and I manage all these report inventories, and they're linked back to data elements and all that fun stuff, and we're measuring the performance of that, but it still doesn't justify my existence at the end of the day, right? That report has some kind of value. Is it worth 10,000? Is it worth 5,000? Is it worth 4,000? So that's what I'm saying, the why. If you're tracking the why things exist to support data management or data value, the why, you can present to, it seems to be the customer for me now a lot is the finance side. They're like, I'm spending all that money on Calibra, I'm spending all this money on these other tools, but I can't really justify it. And I got 7 people supporting that. That's $700,000 a year. Am I getting $700,000 a year in return? Mm-hmm. So really now the pendulum is why in terms of what is the value of that data? Like, for example, you could have, I don't know, a data birth field. By the time you evaluate that data birth field, you may say that data birth field, based on where it's used and how it's used, is really worth $150 per data birth, right? You start getting down to that level. Or even on the report side, I may have, I don't know, some reports in one platform and I want to move to another platform. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to know why the cost is the way it is. If I move from this platform, I'm removing $20,000 a month in report generation costs. But if I move to this platform, I've converted that to only $5,000, right? So that's a reduction of $15,000.
Kevin, that's a very interesting perspective that you're bringing. Yeah. The conversation has moved to why. Is there a point in this overall data management governance that happened? As it happened gradually? What triggered the conversation from what and how to why?
Oh, well, we used to focus a lot on, remember the times when we'd say, well, I got data monetization. I want to make money off the data. I want to sell it. And that never really totally flew. I didn't really see. But I always saw people say, well, how do I reduce costs to support my data or to transmit my data? That's one of them. That's the why. That's part of the why. And then there's mitigating risk. And every time I turn around, there's a California regulation, a European regulation, another state regulation. And then after a while, tracking that relationship to mitigate risk also became a value, a dollar value. For example, CCPA, if I owned a company in California or done business in the United States and did a lot of California folks, I may have possibly 27 million customers, if you will, or 20 million customers. And the probability of an accident happen, I think, is something like, I don't know, I can't remember, it was like 27% chance or something like that. I don't know. But anyways, I'd have to go kind of look at that. But there's a certain percentage or probability that event's going to occur. If that event occurs, and it's a $700 penalty, blah, blah, blah. When it all dust settles, you end up with a $300 million hickey against your company, possibly, if that data breach happens. And that's all by mitigating that risk, right? So you have to be able to quantify that risk and manage to that dollar amount associated with that risk.
So some of the conversation, what you're saying is it's driven by the finances, the cost aspect of it. Now also risk mitigation because of some of the regulatory things that are coming up over the horizon with the CCPA, with GDPR. So those also triggered this discussion of why. That's what you're saying. Yeah,
that's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah.
What other influences do you hear, though? I mean, I work a lot with chief data officers. They're also always thinking about what's the ROI, like what's the return on investment for a lot of these technology tools. Can you think of more other examples other than reducing cost and saving headcount and some of the more negative aspects, I think?
Yeah. That's true. Increasing revenue is extremely important, obviously, and that's part of one of the things in the world of data valuation, right? So here's an example. Let's say I sold, I don't know, I'll make it up, Netflix or something streaming services. That customer record is, we'll say maybe they pay $10, $12 a month, right? So you could honestly say that master record for that customer is worth $12 a month. How can I, on the monetization side, or I should say the revenue side, take that 10 and make it 12 or 13 or 14? So that's where that comes from. So I do that analysis and I discover that the member record's worth $12 per record per month. But if I wanted to upsell that particular record, what other services would I sell to it? And so it's that correlation really is what that member record is worth, right? And then what can we, upsell to? I mean, it's, sounds kind of basic, but in reality, some customer records, they never materialize past the first 90 days because you get a 90-day kind of promotion period and all that fun stuff. But that member record is there may be promotional tactics, if you will, to take that 90-day promotional member record and move it forward and move it up the value chain, if you will, to do upsells or cross sells.
So that's really where we.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's really where we see data governance teams, working very closely with, the sales, marketing, and product team, so that they can so they can make those type of better sales campaigns, better marketing pitches to a better customer because they have the data, right?
Because they have the data, but how fast can you find and interpret that data? That's the hard part, right? It's all speed nowadays. It's like
that's true. That's true. So Kevin, you have a very deep data governance and data management experience, right? So if you go back in the resume, you've been a board member of North Texas Data Management Association. I mean, it's a lot of governance. But let me ask you this, somewhat of a tough question to data governance professionals, right? So data governance in the past, I don't know if it's now, is seen as an overhead. right? The moment,
It is.
somebody says data governance, oh man, right? So
Yeah.
that kind of thinking. And then there was even a discussion in the past, or maybe we should call it something else because of this, negative. So what is the current state of data governance in the industry? It's morphed to something else, or how is it being positioned?
Yeah, that's a great question. There is this trend now to go towards this thing. I kind of alluded to it in a bit, data monetization. Data monetization is increase revenue, reduce cost, mitigate risk. It's the three things. So now everything is.
Say those three things again. That was very quick. Let's say it one more time. What are the three things?
Yeah, three things really. The world right now has evolved to data monetization, which I was kind of talking about the why, right? It's increase revenue. Okay, that's good. Reduce risk, right? I should say reduce cost and mitigate risk. Reduce cost and mitigate risk. Okay. It's the stuff that we've always said before, but we've never assigned it. We've never assigned those elements to data, meaning I can reduce cost on the data structures or the data transmission, right? I can mitigate the risk that's happening with the data. I didn't even mention quality, right? I'm just saying reducing risk, right? Which, all that kind of fun stuff. And then increasing revenue by identifying records and identifying records that either can help me promote more effective business or make more effective business decisions where I can drive revenue, that kind of stuff. But it's really data monetization. It's the umbrella thing now. And what's really cool is this: if you take the data monetization world, there's a new role that companies are starting to put in place. It's called the data monetization officer.
Have you seen that as an official title in many companies?
A few.
Okay.
Here's what's interesting. There's the chief data officer, we know, and they're protecting the data pretty much and all that fun stuff. But no one's really managing that monetization side, which I talked about: increase revenue, reduce costs, right? Mitigate risk. No one's really owning that. That's really, who's always asking for that? That's the finance side. The finance is going, tell me what's going on. Of course. Why all this burn, right? So
they care about the money, right?
They care about the money, and rightly so. But let me branch out one step farther. Remember back in the day when we would talk about enterprise architecture? I'm a big enterprise architecture guy. And enterprise architecture was always important to me because that allowed me to manage enterprise change. So I look at the data monetization world not only about understanding the risk and the costs and the value of the data, it's understanding enterprise change. So when I look at that, when the finance guy comes to the data monetization team, it's saying, hey, tell me about the data. But also we're going to be making changes. We have transformation initiatives underway to make money and reduce costs. How does that play to you? Because you understand the data monetization world. So how does that come into play? So I'm starting to see that data monetization is now, I think over the next year or so, even now, is starting to move into a part of enterprise change. It really is. In order to tell the story of data, you need to know the technology, you need to know the systems it lives, you need to know the locations, you need to know the channels, you need to know the lines of business. To me, that's relevant. You can't monetize data unless you know channels and lines of business, frankly, and the products in which they serve. You can't. So if you're going to really monetize data and handle enterprise change, think of data monetization as enterprise change. It's part of the transformation office. It's part of all that. Because if somebody, I remember I was working at one large company in the West Coast, and their whole thing was, I'm probably throwing another thing at you because we're having a candid conversation, is I govern my company by capabilities. I took the value chain. Yeah, it's a good question. If you take a company's value chain and flatten it out from level 1 to level 3, you flatten it out. There's products, there's sales, there's service, and you break it out. There's finance, there's IT, basic value chain of a company. You take that and you break that down to like hierarchy 1 through 3. And level 3 would be your lowest node and lowest activity, like produce product or whatever, right? But every one of those items on that capability tree, don't go any lower than 3, every one of those on that capabilities are associated with data, pretty much. So if I were to build this, in the old days, we started these stewardship organizations, remember, by information domains, that's how we lived. Yeah. And that became very siloed and everybody fought about who really owned the data. You don't do that anymore. that's the bottom up approach. I think you need to do that your first level out of the gate just to understand your data landscape. Has to be done. But then you come down from the top down and say, I want to approach it from the capability side. And that capability side will allow me to take data and use it across multiple capabilities or domains. For example, product will use the same data that sales uses or service uses. They point kind of to the same data sets, if you will, at times, right, in their life cycle or their processes. So it's key to us to realize that in order to succeed in governance, you have to start from that bottom up, get your baseline. And then you also got to come top down and build your hierarchy, your capability model, and to represent your business, whereby you can assign stewardship to those capabilities. Does that make sense? I like to assign my stewardship to those subject areas or those capability areas more so than I do to information domains. I know we started out that path, but I don't think it's a viable path long term. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm seeing a lot of.
I mean, that makes sense. I mean, because capabilities, can transcend beyond the traditional domains. And I see that stewards have to see a lot of the end to end of the data lifecycle. So it
does, yes.
can definitely cross. So certainly makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's kind of fun actually. And it's nice because the business really feels part of it, because the stewardship, when you assign them to those capability areas, they live and work in those areas.
Mm-hmm.
So they get it, they can understand and rationalize it, and they understand the touch points of the data, really gives a good business flair. Right. Yeah.
So going into a little bit deeper into this area, right? So data governance, there are best practices, right? So the most fun thing that I have a discussion about, everybody says these are the best practices. Hey, you have a data governance professional from the business side, get the stakeholder support from the highest executive. Projects that succeed are the ones who follow best practices. And then there is this reality. So the reality is, yes, it starts with the business person doing data governance, and that person does not have time, because that is not measured by, their managers, how much time you spent in data governance. They're measured by, how much revenue did you, get in, how much cost, right? So then they transfer that data governance to technical side kind of stuff, right? So Kevin, what are you seeing from a trends perspective? Are we able to bridge the gap between what are the best practices versus what is the reality in terms of how we should follow the best practices?
Yeah, I know. It's kind of a catch-22. You're right, performance metrics, and people just tailor their behavior to performance metrics, but really never get to the gist of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the tough thing. I think what I've learned anyways for when I say stewardship and all that fun stuff, it just to me is data quality a lot, right?
Yeah.
And when I think of data quality, it isn't so much the data quality checks. That's good and all. Our technical people do that all the time, right? Mm-hmm. And there's data quality dimensions and all that fun stuff. But really, you have to, if I had to make my stewardship organization effective, I'd have to teach everybody really how to do, I'll call it the data quality framework. Right? And the data quality framework that I always think of when I think of data quality is a touch on issues management, problem management, release management. I'm tapping into the IT life cycle. So in order for me to be effective in the stewardship world, it's taken the IT services that already exist today in these large firms, incident management, problem management, release management, change management, all that fun stuff that executes in harmony. It's been doing it a while, is making your data quality life cycle tied into that. And I like to use, I don't know if you read much on David Lawson stuff, but I love reading on David Lawson's virtuous data quality life cycle, or cycle of data quality, he would call it. But in that cycle of data quality, he takes into consideration, hey, find the issues, leverage issues management. And some things actually materialize into projects, not just remediated as an issue. So if you think of data quality as not really totally just issues management, but leveraging the back-end processes that IT has for issues, problem, change, release, config, all that fun stuff, you're on the right track. And I think that behavior drives the stewardship organization because it holds everybody accountable. You're tapping into the, I don't know, I'll call it the backbone of how things are discovered, designed, developed, and deployed. And that's what it's all about, right? Speed.
Mm-hmm. Kevin, I wanted to ask you, I mean, you've been a data governance consultant. I mean, could you walk us through what are the top things you look for when day one you're entering a new company for a project? What type of questions would you be asking this organization to sort of assess their data maturity? And then what types of things would you do to try to help them in terms of achieving their data goals?
Yeah, there's a couple of frameworks one would use. I like to use the open source one, Mike 2. I don't know if you're familiar with Mike 2. You could do CMM or whatever, but I like the open source one because I don't have to pay for it. I'm kind of cheap. So I take Mike 2 and I kind of tweak it, but it's all about, do you have an enterprise data model is a question maybe, right? The data model stuff. What's your enterprise data model look like? What's your canonical model? Do you have an inventory of reports? Do you have an inventory of reports? Are those reports linked back to CDEs? Do you apply quality rules to those CDEs? And the reason I keep bringing up reports is because the speed of adoption is all about reports. It's data and analytics. Remember, we used to say data governance. Really, it's data and analytics governance.
So Kevin, is that the current state assessment you're talking about?
Yeah, the current state assessment, yeah. So I'd start asking those questions and probe it to figure out, and then do you have a stewardship model? What are your policies regarding security? Do you have those documented? All that stuff. If I took the Dembach wheel and I punched all the way around those and probed, that's kind of how I look at it. But Mike 2 allows me that, open source kind of method allows me to do that same thing with a standard tool, if you will, or standard questions that people use. But that's right. That's what I would use to do the current state assessment, pretty much. Yeah. But, when it's all, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Did you say something?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think, Kevin, I mean, that's really good. So you're starting with the current state assessment, and then afterwards, then you would put together a maturity model assessment, and then you propose what are the next steps? Just following up on Peggy's.
So I would score it from level 1 to level 5. We love that terminology, right? But there's one thing I like to use. It's like, I like level 2 and level 3 is reactive and proactive. Most customers are reactive. In some instances proactive, but mostly reactive, between reactive and proactive, 2 and a 3. That's just the way it is. Overall. They're either a 1.6 below reactive, whatever, but that's what we're finding, right?
And I'll give you the flip side. As a consultant, you wouldn't go wrong if you do 2 and 3.
No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. My goal is to get you to 3. Yeah. It's a lot of work to get to 4 and 5, whatever, but 3 is what I want to get you defined and you measured, right? I'm happy. And then everybody's happy. So my goal on these assessments, current state, is figure out what would I do to take that 1 in that category or that 2 and make it a 3. That's what I build my mindset off of.
Yeah.
Get them to 3 as quick as possible. And that's what we do. And it's not a tool problem though, a lot, right? That's the part, you can spend a lot of money on tools to solve half of those things, but it's mostly procedures and people and knowing where things are.
And how much of it is also the culture of the organization? I mean, that I see is data culture is one of the hardest things to increase and change quickly. What are your thoughts on that, Kevin? I mean, that's something obviously you can't just hire a consultant to fix. It's required much more.
Good, right, Peggy?
Yeah, you could. Well, here's the deal. Everything, it is all about a culture. It's all about establishing behavior, but that all begins with establishing awareness, frankly. I had 2 large projects that I was on where the main goal was, okay, I got my stewardship organization up, I got governance, but I need to raise the level of awareness across the enterprise. And that awareness became on training sessions, some of them the stewards, not stewards, but that wasn't the problem with stewards. It was getting the company aware of how to think about data. And that awareness, when they discovered an anomaly, where to go, how do we report it? Establishing that comfortability. So on one customer I had, we did the awareness campaign on TV screens and break rooms and marketing materials, if you will, internally. And you have to go that awareness level. Otherwise, I don't think you can do it because people don't have the desire unless they are aware. And they're not going to definitely learn the knowledge unless you create the desire, right? Yep. And they're not going to get the ability unless you kind of, apply that knowledge to that skill. I don't know if you're familiar with AdCar at all.
What's that?
AdCar by ProSci, change management.
I myself, I'm not familiar. I don't know, Peggy, if you are.
No.
Yeah, okay. Mike 2 for data assessment, data management maturity. ProSci for actually behavior and personal change or professional change, getting people to buy in. ProSci is a program where they teach you to think one thing or think a certain way. And I do this like when I do interview candidates. Are they aware of what they need to do?
I see.
Do they have the desire to do it? Do they have the knowledge to do it? I can have the knowledge to do it, but do I have the ability to do it? And the last part is, can I report or reinforce on it? It's that AdCar model that if you're going to go do change for data governance, I firmly believe in, because it's what's the awareness? How do I create the desire? Why aren't my executives doing what I asked them to do? How do I create that desire? So you create a heat map on your executives, if you will, say this person's green, red, or yellow, and you manage to that. You try to, convert the red to yellow, convert the yellow to green. So you heat map your organization, maybe by department or people level, depends how you want to do it. Yeah, but it's quite effective. It really is. So if you use that model for your people side of governance, you're on track.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, you bring a very good point. No, the people, process, technology, we typically do that for the processes, right? And we typically do that for technologies. But what you're saying is you do that also for the people, right? Especially the executive management, you grade them on their support for whatever you're implementing, it's a red, yellow, green, and then you manage that. That's a really good point.
Yeah. It's pretty fun because they hate to see themselves in red on an org chart, because I'll have the org chart and I pop up red, yellow, green. This is where I'm finding buy-in, and people may not like it, but it's true, right?
I can't imagine myself going into the executive meeting. Hey, now you're red, so I'll take you from red to yellow. So I don't want. So that's what I call it, a CLM, a career limiting move.
Yeah, it is. I guess what I should say on that one is me and my sponsor would review that heat map.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard today and would like to hear more, please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite player like iTunes and Spotify. And please do rate our podcast. Also, please go to our website, www.datatransformerspodcast.com for more episodes, blogs, and information on our speakers. Thank you.